Hello, everyone, and welcome to our panel, Why Nature Matters to Your Business Strategy, and looking at the important role that we as a jewelry industry can collectively play. I am super happy to be in Vicenza, the heart of craftsmanship and design and manufacturing of jewelry. And I also would like to congratulate the leadership team of Vicenza Oro for taking this topic on the agenda of this important 2-3 days. I also like to thank Dr. Gaetano Cavalieri, present here today, for his support and again for really acting as a change agent to bring the industry together to tackle the topic of sustainability. And with me, I have some fantastic panelists. So next to me, I have Davide Tonon from Quantis, who is actually an expert on climate and nature, and we're really delighted that you are coming to join us today. We have Francesca Manfredi from the Kering Group, Head of Innovation, I would also say a change agent in her own way. Thank you. We have John Mulligan from the World Gold Council, who has been instrumental actually leading one of the pillars of the Watch Jewellery Initiative. And we have Alice from Vanni from Ital Preziosi, and thank you also for being an active member of the Watch and Jewellery Initiative 2030. Before we dive in the discussion, allow me just to give a few words on who does not know about our initiative. The Watch and Jewellery Initiative 2030 was co-founded by Cartier and Kering only 2 years ago, really as a platform for action, as a platform for working together on key topics that matter for our industry and that are so interconnected. And here we are talking about climate resilience, biodiversity, and nature, and inclusiveness. And this morning, I went to the leadership session of Paola De Luca on trends, what is happening in our industry. And while I'm sure we can all agree that never, ever we've been in such probably uncertain times, and we talk about geopolitical crisis, we talk about volatility, we talk about the climate threats that we experience every day, from storms to floods to nature. But she was also talking about the importance of co-creation. And I think if there's one thing that is super important at this moment for the industry, is to co-create and to action. And that's why we're also very proud of our collaboration with Cibjo on this. So let's tackle in the topic of climate action, because sometimes people tell me that, climate, what does it really mean for our business? And maybe it's time to realize that climate is really about business. If you're not going to manage your climate strategy, you won't have a business. And I'd like to start with you, Davide, that could you kind of set the scene? What does it mean, really, the concept of climate and nature, and also biodiversity? How is it interlinked to a business strategy? And also, how can companies focus? I know that many SMEs, when they talk to me, they say, and they're really the fabric of our industry, what can you do? How can you start this journey? So please set the scene.
Thank you very much, Iris, for the question. And actually is really the kind of question we hear a lot from our observatory. We are, as Quantis, we are a company that is really working on environmental sustainability, so try really to helping other companies in defining what is important to do in terms of sustainability using a science-based approach. So really try to put science behind sustainability, and that is, I think, already a part of the answer. Like, how can we prioritize? Why is that is important for our business? For us, is really try to do it using science, so try to build a bridge between what is the environmental impact that we all have within our businesses and the private sector especially, and trying to do and try to link it with the business and with the impact that we can have on in general on climate, but in nature as well. What we see in our observatory, and maybe this is interesting to see, is that within the past especially in the past 5 years, we have seen really a growing understanding and acting from the companies on the climate topic, right? So is a topic that has been raising, and a lot of companies have been starting developing targets and try to understand what they could do. The reason is that, of course, we see also really the effect on climate on the society. We see the rise on temperature and what is doing on nature. These have been also possible thanks to initiatives that are out there. The Science-Based Target Initiative is one of them, which has been really able to develop a framework that is shared between different companies on how to set targets, how to measure our impacts, and then how to set targets that are actually reliable and compared from one company to the other. Just think that now we have more than 6,000 companies on these initiatives, covering more or less 40% of the global market economy. So just to give you a bit of the magnitude on how much now, how many companies are now actually have a commitment on climate. What is more complex is then when we start speaking not only about climate, but also about nature. So it is clear that climate and nature are actually topics that are well interconnected. However, if for climate we know how to measure the impact, how to set targets that, for example, are compliant with the Paris Agreement, when we speak about nature, then is very different. When we speak about biodiversity, on water, this is something that is much more complex, also because it's much more local than for climate, which is more a global issue. And to try to explain this, we normally use the theory of the planetary boundaries. So I invite anyone here, if then you have time to investigate more and to read more about it. But just in a nutshell, the theory of the planetary boundaries is basically telling us that climate actually is one of those boundaries of the Earth, and basically human, with our actions, we are pushing on different aspects of Earth, of the boundaries that Earth has. And for each of them, there is a limit in which if we act too much, for example, on biodiversity and water, we reach a tipping point that the Earth is not able to actually absorb the impact and go back to the normal kind of the normal status of itself. Therefore, what is here very important to say is that climate is a part of the problem and the solution, but it's very interconnected with all the other aspects that needs to be taken into account. And here, another couple of things I wanted to say is that when we speak about biodiversity, what companies are now doing is that focusing first on climate and then trying to understand what they can do about biodiversity. The good news here is that we start having framework also for nature and for other kind of media, environmental media, which is very important for companies to try to understand where they are. And here I come to answering your question, Iris. In order to understand where to prioritize, we need to have metrics that allow us to understand first where we are as a company, where is our impact, and then how to take action and where we need to go here. So there are now that we start having initiatives such as the Science Based Target Network that is developing framework also for nature to try to have a common and more holistic approach that allow actually companies to know that when they do an action, when they take an action on climate, this will not have a counter effect on water or on biodiversity, which is the risk if we just look at one actually environmental indicator. And just last thing allow me to say is that that I think is key. The real difference that we have when we speak about climate and when we speak about nature is that climate is really a global issue. So when, as a company, we take an action that reduces, for example, our carbon footprint of one tons of CO2 equivalent in Europe, is really the same from a global perspective, or reducing it in South America, in China, in Asia. Whereas when we talk about nature more in general, when, for example, you think about water, not using 1 cubic meter of water in a country where there is a lot of water scarcity has an impact that is way higher than doing it in a country where actually the water is abundant. So this really set a very different way also how to act on those problems. And really the good news is that we start having metrics as well to measure that and to be able to track also the improvement from a company perspective.
Davide, before I go to John, I would like to ask a question, because SMEs are struggling. We saw that, and I know that within the Watch Jewellery Initiative, I invite you really to look at our nature roadmap, because we really want to get the industry fit for purpose. We heard it, I think, in our earlier panel with Raluca. Regulations are there, regulations are coming, and we need to see that our industry is fit for purpose to understand what does nature mean and what can you do. You're an SME in the supply chain. How do you start? What is your first step? Just very quick. And I invite people really to go to that nature roadmap, but also maybe to join at a later stage where we're actually building this ladder for SMEs to help understand the first steps.
I think is a very good point, right? So in general, on this kind of initiatives, from experience, I see normally the big group starting and then driving, of course, all the supply chain throughout this kind of changes. So if I'm an SME, of course, I can start immediately, start understanding what I can do, but also I think is key the collaboration throughout the supply chain. So it's really key to start speaking with, of course, with what is upstream and downstream with my supply chain to better really understand what is what I can do. Of course, what the metrics that we have can be used for good for big enterprises, but also for small enterprises. And I think really anyone at each point of the supply chain can really start and doing its part. And actually, the earlier that we start, the bigger the impact we can have, and we can be actually driving much more, and we can be prepared from like the question that we're going to receive in the future. As you said, regulation is coming in Europe, but also in other regions. So actually, at some point, the ask from big corporates is going to come. So also from an SME perspective, the earlier we start understanding where we stand in terms of impact and pressure on nature and what we can do about it is going to be also very important for the business, because it's going to be an advantage from also the competition.
Of course, when we talk about nature, we cannot disconnect it, and this brings me to you, John, from the other topics, because sometimes people are thinking in boxes. Sustainability is not one box. You can't just tick one box. You have to look at the connectivity also, with human rights. We also know with climate and nature, the biggest impact with human rights, and often also women, when big issues hit this world. Everyone is now talking about the bigger topic of just transition, leaving no one behind. Could you tell our audience a bit more, what is the concept of just transition? And what does that mean really also as a company if you want to start that journey on just transition?
Thank you. And thanks again for this opportunity. So the term just transition is interpreted differently by different people. And that, I think, is very important. When once a year, I spend a few days in Africa at a big mining and energy conference that starts with the ministerial forum, where the African ministers, the mining and energy ministers, they arrive and they discuss these issues. For them, the just transition is defense of jobs, typically, first and foremost. It is energy security, and the phrase that we hear, unfortunately, most often is, I will deal with my energy poverty first and the energy transition second. For them, the just transition is for the developed world to allow them to do that. The difficulty of that, as David has said, is we all need to be embarked on this journey. So the question is, how do you defend livelihoods? How do you hopefully create opportunities whilst accelerating the transition? Now that, I think, is the just transition in a kind of nutshell and an aspiration. However, I'd like to touch upon a couple of points David raised when you talked about climate being global and nature being local. Mm-hmm. Climate is global if you're talking about purely about decarbonization. If you're talking about climate impacts on the ground, physical climate impacts, the lived experience of climate, it's local. Mm. It's also intrinsically tied in with ecosystems. You mentioned water systems, your ability to feed yourself. All of those are interlinked. And then the social and women. So for instance, if you have water shortage, prolonged water shortage, somebody has to go and get the water. Unfortunately, in many places, it's the women who go and get the water. It's often the young women, which means they're not being educated, which means that whole social development opportunity is challenged. So this is very much a holistic aspect. Climate, nature, the social impacts are integrated, and we need to look at it that way. And if we start to look at it that way, I think we're in a better position to start to talk about what a just transition means on the ground.
And just a figure, and I think it's a shocking figure, but according to the Potsdam Institute, and it's only a report a few months ago, climate change is on track to cost the global economy $38 trillion a year in damages by 2049. And what I really like about this report is it actually tells us it's an economic cost, it's a business cost. Yes, governments have to step in, but everyone will have to tackle it. And I think when we talked, I don't remember who it was in the previous panel on sustainability. Sustainability is not about sustainability. Sustainability is about business innovation. We will all have to rethink our business model, from our sourcing to our manufacturing practices to even, how we bring our product to the consumer. We need to rethink the whole model, looking at climate impact and biodiversity and nature. And this brings me to Kering, and I think we can humbly admit, and it's not because maybe you could say I'm biased because you're a co-founder of the initiative. No, I've been following Kering a long time in my career when they were still PPR. They were always ahead of the game on climate and nature and some of these topics and innovation. And that's why we're really delighted to have you, Francesca, because it is an imperative. And could you elaborate a little bit, why it is so critical for us as an industry now to step up, and how you as Kering are adapting to this new reality?
Thank you, Iris, for this question, and thank you for this panel, to Cibjo for having organized together with the initiative this very interesting discussion. Well, especially in the jewelry industry, we have to consider that our raw materials belong to Mother Nature. So why climate is important, why biodiversity preservation is important? Because if we want to continue to have good business results, if we want to continue to have good impact also on people working in our supply chains and people living in remote countries, we have to take care of those places. And how we take care of those places, very important, is the collaboration, as I was saying before. But if we would like to give two concrete examples, for example, we collaborate with an ASM in Peru, and we continuously work on education with them in order to even more explain the role of mercury and cyanide for their health. But even more important is a very extensive activity we have in French Guiana, where we collaborate with a local organization called Solicas to restore exhausted mines. So we are very happy that after few years, we are finally seeing coming back animals and the plants that were not there anymore.
And I think that's also where there's a huge opportunity to work together with some of the leading brands who are very advanced, to learn some of those practices, for the wider industry, and also to put that topic high on the agenda. Going back also on collaboration, I'm going to Alice, and then I want to go back to Francesca. It's clear that collaboration plays a key role in driving sustainability efforts, and I think that your company has always had a very collaborative mindset. Not only I think the CEO, I visited you a few times, but the whole culture breeds that. Can you explain a bit why it is so important to not work in an isolated space, but also, we know that the industry is being criticized on not being open enough, and often when I get that question from a journalist, I humbly respond, yes, of course, the industry needs to become more transparent. Honestly, like many industries, it will take time, but I think it's also very important then when we communicate that we're able to communicate credibly, and that the facts matter. And so I would also, so let's first start about collaboration. What does it mean for your company? And then I'd like to go a little bit back to how your organization ensures that element of transparency.
Of course, thank you, Iris, and thanks again to the Watch Jewellery Initiative and CBJO, of which we are both members. So I would like to start with this word collaboration. Collaboration is not just meant outside of the company, of course. It needs to be a concept which is within the company, within the team, and outside the company in various ways, in the supply chain, but also with NGOs, associations. And that said, I would like to start saying that when it's about nature and biodiversity, especially when we talk about SMEs or smaller companies, I mean, we are not a multinational, but we started to talk about nature since last year, especially. We did publish part of our nature strategy already in our sustainability report, but the main aspect here is to take the first step and not being afraid about collecting data slowly and progressively. And collaboration here is crucial within the company, because even to collect data, you need to create awareness and education, and this takes time. And also education is not just about the team, it's also about the governance. We started to do formation also in our board of directors on these topics, because the board needs to be aware also in leading this concept. You mentioned our CEO. Of course, our CEO, Ivana Ciabatti, has been always at the forefront of human rights and environment. And that said, to go through big problems and big impacts, you need to go through innovation and a creative mindset even to go after that. And collaboration is crucial, because sitting down in the same round tables of different stakeholders can give you many inputs, and you can give actually other inputs. Since last year, we started to go and be active part of the European Business and Biodiversity Summit that took place in Milan last year. And it was a great roundtable to start understand how Europe was moving towards that. Last year, we became member of the Task Force for Nature Non-Financial Disclosure, TNFD, and we would like to become first adopters. And we are following their strategy and guidelines. It's not easy, but you can start from there to set the base. And this is a part of collaboration. So within a company, outside the company, through expert roundtables, where you don't have to be expert, but you will become with time an expert on that. And also other roundtables that are with associations like the Watch Jewellery Initiative that is doing a great job, especially on climate and nature. And one of the most important aspects, which is supply chain. And I want to recall what Francesca said. Supply chain, especially for those that are aware of, science-based target, SBTi on climate, they all know that Scope 3 is the headache of all the business, because you are actually having you have to have an impact on other businesses. How do you start that? With education, as Francesca says, but also supporting your counterpart, even collecting data. Maybe you can start, as we are doing. We have created a KYC and another KYC, which we called EYC, Empower Your Counterpart, where we collect data on human rights, climate, and nature. Why that? Because at the end of this questionnaire, they actually can realize that they started doing sustainability reporting. And these data, at the same time, are crucial for us to understand the impact. Just then I get the other continue, but I want to also say that he mentioned a word, which is crucial now, impact. Now we don't talk anymore about sustainability reporting, it's impact report, especially for those that are based in Europe with the new CSRD and the CSRD-DD. There's always more D, but the main point is that we need to measure impacts. And in the regulations, climate and close, there will be also nature, will be requirements also in the supply chain. So it's on the business interest, not just as a vision as we have, because it's a matter of vision to have a good impact on the society and environment, but it will be a risk management for a company to be striving in the future and have cost cutting in the long term.
Yeah, and I think, we see the regulatory pressure. You were talking about the CSR DDD and then also the due diligence that's going much deeper. But what I think is really important for the industry to understand is gone are the days of the social side only. Today, you will have to do your environmental and nature due diligence. And if we are not going to start educating the industry about this, we will be left behind. And Francesca, I mean, like I said, Kering has been spearheading this. Your team has been very active also in the initiative, helping us really build that nature strategy, working on that nature roadmap that is now in full consultation with external stakeholders, civil society, academics, because we want to be humble. We just don't want to say, this is it, right? Let's really get a sharp perspective from others before we launch it fully to the industry. What do you see as some of the challenges, maybe for Kering, but also for the industry, and how can we get the SMEs on board?
Well, thank you for this question, Iris, which is great. I believe that the first point we have to take in consideration when we talk about nature is decarbonization, because we work in a world where prosperity comes first. We know, we have to be honest. So why do we have to invest? Because thanks to collaboration, we can create interconnections with SMEs, like in the gold industry. We were discussing before about gold. So the use of recycled gold is there and will grow constantly. So how can we really reduce the impact of our industry by integrating innovation and technologies in the supply chain locally? So, for example, when it comes to mining, it's always, the word I always say is, I always listen is, it's complicated, it's difficult. Okay, it is. Let's do something. And so we are working on different projects, which are not simple, I have to say, and every time I have to prepare a meeting on that topic is like, oh, I'm gonna do it. But the topic is, are we able to drive the change? Yes. There are technologies, we need experts, and again here, where do I see the need of collaboration? In the exportation of knowledge. In countries which are working since ever with certain methodologies, but they really have the willingness to do better. And I know that maybe Alice could add on this topic.
Yeah.
Now? Okay,
Just
I don't want
a short comment, Alice, because I'd like to go to Davide to talk about the SMEs, yeah.
No, of course, yeah. Of course, collaboration and decarbonization is another aspect which is crucial. And again, I tried to talk about this also in another panel about recycled gold, but what she says is crucial because there are no easy answers to difficult problems. So the answer is taking action and making sure that no one is left behind. Sometimes I had the impression that recycled gold has been an easy answer to difficult problems because it's easy to decarbonize when you have recycled material. While if you really want to have a positive impact, you need to think that there are people living with mining. And there is mining, again, that could be positive. Mining companies are even more prepared on biodiversity than any other companies because to work on their projects, they need to have a restoration plan by law, and not that many people knows this. So actually, we should collaborate more with those working well and not forget also the small-scale miners. In fact, collaboration in this with brands that are interested, of course, and they are doing an amazing job is crucial, but each actors in the supply chain needs to collaborate with each one expertise to make sure that everyone can be empowered and there's a just transition, not an easy transition.
But when we talk about, empowering, I think the SMEs are at the heart. We shouldn't forget they're the fabric of our industry, often family businesses that will not have experts and will not have that capacity building. I think that's where the initiative really wants to invest in to help the suppliers community advance. Or I think our strategic partnerships, with the Global Compact and also now with Quantis and Boston Consulting and Deloitte is really there to build that capacity and learning. But Davide, to go back to the question, I'd like to hear from you very concretely, like, how can an SME start? What is a concrete action? They have nothing. There's a white paper. What should they do?
Very good question. And I think that really the idea also for an SME, the first thing that each company needs to do when it starts acting and start understanding what can do in terms of environment, so climate and nature in general, is firstly to assess where it starts from. So whenever action we need to take, we need to understand that is the right one, that is the one that matters the most. So especially in SME, as you were saying, with maybe less resources than, for example, a big group, it's really important to start understanding where most of our impact lies from. And most of the time we will understand when maybe, yes, in our house, in our scope 1 and 2, so that the energy part that we have in terms of impact is a part, but then within the supply chain is where most of the impact lies. So at the end is really prioritizing is really first understanding where we are, where our impact lies from, and then going to prioritize action throughout, for example, the supply chain. And there, what Alicia and Francesca were saying, I think I totally stands for, because at the end, where we understand that the impact actually are coming throughout the supply chain, so the action that we will have to take are very local. So there will be throughout, actually at the end, maybe on our supply chain, there will be those that will be very, very important. And firstly, we need to understand where to act before being actually able to do it. So there will be two different things. I think one is going to act on our actual impact, even if I'm an SME, so what I can do about energy, what I can do about my prior emissions that are, for example, within my offices, within my manufacturing facility, but then also going throughout the value chain and understanding where the main impact comes from climate, but also from a more holistic view, as we said, nature, but also social perspective, and prioritize based on where the most impact comes from.
So, and I think this brings me to John. What we saw, so when companies join the Watch Jewellery Initiative 2030, they commit to 3 pillars: climate resilience, biodiversity, and nature and inclusiveness. And for the first pillar, we asked companies to commit to SBTI, Science Based Targets Initiative, because we do believe our industry needs to think science, and because then we have reliable data. But of course, we also acknowledge that for an SME, it's quite a journey, and that we can't expect them to just go to these big programs. And I think I'd love you to share, John, very openly, that it has been a wonderful, exciting journey, but quite a struggle, and the steps we've taken to bring them on the journey, because I think sometimes SMEs will think, I can't do it. Yes, you can, but you need help. So I thought maybe you can kind of give a bit an overview of what we've done in that first pillar.
I'm very happy to. And I think it's reflective, not just of the Watch and Jewellery Initiative members, it's reflective of whole economic sectors and how you encourage the small companies, those that are not that well resourced, or they don't have an appropriate skill set or knowledge, or don't even know where to look. How do you get them to start? And I'm going to focus on the start, because that was, I think, our first experience. There were some very, very advanced companies who are members of the Watch and Jewellery Initiative who, frankly, probably don't need that much support and advice. And I look to you. But they're already advanced. They've already done nearly all of the work. They've already reported. They've already understand the task at hand. It's the ones that are nervous or cautious about starting that you really need to support and work on. And that was our first learning, was we need to look at the SMEs and set them aside, because we don't want them to be intimidated by the big brands who basically already done this and have the resource. And we don't want them to think this is a big company thing. I need to have that resource or that scale of operation to do this. And a lot of that has been education, but it's been education, not just pushing things out. And to be honest, we've tried that too. With webinars, getting the SBTI involved, getting consultants involved, and said, we will tell you as much as we think you need to know, or even more, and we will give you resources. And we are about to, if I could mention the Climate Navigator, we're about to publish something which frankly is a fairly comprehensive resource, saying these are all of the different points we think you need to know. But that's not always enough, and there's an element, wherever it's possible, and you can't do it in total, of starting to engage on a bilateral level and saying, okay, well, what was the specific point that stopped you, or where are you stuck? And that's what we've been doing recently, talking through some processes, saying, can we ensure that you get to reach this first milestone, and then we'll talk about the next milestone. But it is a question of presenting the resources, making them easy to access, making them not intimidatory, or not so you don't think, oh my goodness, I've got so much to read or learn. I'm sure we all have experienced some of this. And then saying, again, once you start, and you can probably talk to this too, or both of you, I guess, once you start, you gain momentum. You know what the problems are, you know what's missing. And as we say, nobody's going to fix it all perfectly. But you have to start. And again, then you start asking questions. And to go back to some of the points from the World God Council position, we spend a lot of time trying to, first of all, my focus was primarily on climate, but I moved to a far more broader sustainability strategy role because it's all interrelated. But on the climate aspect, when it comes to gold, for example, it's actually the miner has to act because the downstream supplier, the jeweler, is going to be asking the refiner to ask the miner where they are. The positive, and this comes back to the impact issue, is if that miner decarbonizes, he decarbonizes at scale. Mm-hmm. So in the gold supply chain, 99% of the emissions come from the source. 1% come from refining and jewelry. And therefore, you need to influence your supply chain. But if you do, and you start to find those sources and you can influence, not only do you decarbonize the gold supply chain potentially from the mine, but the good thing about gold mining is it's often the leading actor in a country or certainly in a location. So you can have an outsized impact. However, to go back to the SME point, you need to get started.
Yeah, you need to get started. And I think I love what you said. It's true. Originally, it was quite monologue, right? We would give these webinars, experts would be in front of those SMEs, and we would just communicate. And what we saw when we then asked to follow up actions, and we do that, with the Boston Consulting Group through service and engagement, we actually saw, they're not moving the needle. Why are they not moving the needle? And we saw it was lack of understanding, fear. It could have been, leadership support. Certain expertise missing. And so we kind of turned it around, and really I applaud your support on that. We said, okay, we need to really see that they get help desk support, that they have a momentum to ask questions in a safe space, but then they have to do the work. We're not bringing water to the sea. We're giving you all the support, you need to move the needle. And now we're actually coming to a really protocol on this, so we can really measure step by step, and we call it the ladder approach. How can you go on the stairs and not fall down? That's not what we want, but we want to bring you on this journey of engagement. I'm just very conscious of time. I don't know if there are certain questions still from the audience. Maybe everyone is dreaming for lunch. Maybe just let me recapitulate a few big thoughts. I think first of all, I think climate and nature, I think we all agree, is a shared responsibility. It is about science and it is about data, but it starts with small actions. You can't do it alone. That's why you need tools and education. I think in that context, we're very proud to work with Cibjo on very practical tools, but also with the Global Compact, where we have the Solutions Lab that is actually accessible to any SME for free, to really have introduction to sustainability, to due diligence, to introduction to biodiversity and nature, etc. So I invite you to contact us. We know that probably it also presents the biggest opportunity to rethink your business model, because when we look at everything that's coming in regulations, and I'm sorry I'm here hitting probably with maybe the wrong motivator, it is there, it's not going to go away, so you better bring your business model up to speed. And it also can start with very simple measures, like you said, Davide, understanding your supply chain. Where are you sourcing from? Where are your manufacturing processes? What is the interconnectivity on so much elements like water, energy? What are some of the protocols out there and templates? There is a lot of good templates and models, even to do your first nature assessment. And then also we should not forget talent, right? We were talking about, we're all very privileged to work in this very beautiful industry of craftsmanship. If we want to stay attractive for future talent, we need to see that people will want to work for our industry. So we should see that we protect the reputation as an organization, as an industry of purpose. And then finally, I just wanted to say, and I just hope this works now with the slide, let's see if it works, that we saw that within the Watch and Jewellery Initiative that we really need to develop tools. And we launched the Nature Roadmap at JCK. Like I said, with Marie-Claire Daveux, who the Chief Sustainability Officer of Kering. And that was the first launch, and you can find it on our website. It's now in consultation with civil society, like I said, with the academic world, with many different, with SBTN, etc. We want to have feedback from the industry. We will update the version by end of September. It's going to be relaunched at the General Assembly. And then we're starting really the journey of the implementation, while indeed the big brands are doing this for the SMEs. So stay tuned. We'll continue to update you, but we're also very happy that today we're launching the Climate Change Navigator. And I think, John, it would only be honorable that you kind of give us, why did we finally develop this? Because there was a lot out there, but we just decided we've got to do this.
Yeah.
And what's the purpose?
Well, we've already touched upon it, I think, Iris, and that is that whilst there may not be any kind of one-stop shop to get you moving, we realized that we did need to draw things together. We did need to make these resources accessible, and we need to make them accessible in a kind of structured way. That you can produce a lot of reference points, and you can give people a huge Bible of, TCFD, SBTI, blah, 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 but you need to guide them. And I think the idea of the Climate Change Navigator is it is a guide, it is focused around that commitment to SBTI. It is focused to some extent with that lens of we need to make this accessible. So it should be fairly easy to read. There's a lot of resources it points to, but it doesn't actually, I think, overburden you. So the idea is, yes, I would say this is a great navigator for those wanting to get started, or for those that have got started and want to slightly move forward. For those that are well ahead of their journey, hopefully they'll endorse it rather than need it. But nonetheless, I think it's that getting started. What do you first read to allow you to embark on that journey? And I think this is hopefully a very useful point.
And for those also, joining here today and online, this Climate Change Navigator is actually now being tested till December, and then it will be open to the industry from January 2025. And I think it's a bit also the philosophy of the initiative. Everything we invest in, and I really would like to thank all the members for that. And our partners, we want to test it first because we want to get input then being tested by brands, by SMEs. We always want to review by civil society because, we think it's very important from a governance perspective to be truly multi-stakeholder. And then it's open source for the industry because, we do not want to be a private club. We believe we have a duty to educate and to share. So I would like a warm-hearted applaud for my expert panelists. And and I would like to thank everyone being present here today. And let me end this conversation with climate and nature action isn't just good for business. It is a must to do your business right. Thank you. And everyone should come back at 2:30 sharp for the last seminar. So I hope you enjoy a lovely lunch in Italy, which is not a problem, and see you later. And thank you again for joining.
Thank you.